Hey everybody, this is Maxine Taylor with another edition of Move Into the Magic, where I interview my favorite movers and shakers. And my guest today falls perfectly into that category. David Jacobs is a retired professor of history at Temple University, but he has been a UFO researcher since 1963, and he has investigated over 1,100 abductions. Now you know why he is my guest today, needless to say. He's an author, and I'm not going to give you all of his credentials because that would take up a good bit of our time together. But you can go to his website, ufoabduction.com. His latest book, Walking Among Us. What a grabber for a title. I wish I had my fingers clutched around a copy right now. It's about everything involved in placing hybrids into human society with the help of abductees. And this is quite a topic. It addresses questions about what the alien agenda is, what their goals are, and the ultimate reason why they are here. Fasten your seatbelt. My guest today is going to be awesome. David, welcome to Move Into the Magic, dear.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Now tell us, first of all, how did you get into this and how long have you been doing it? And let's just jump in at the shallow end and move into the deep end.
Well, I got interested in UFOs actually in 1965, and I became enamored with the subject for reasons that I don't fully understand, but it just captured my imagination. And my wife and I were in Los Angeles at the time, and then we moved to Madison, Wisconsin for graduate school, and I became very much more involved with it starting in 1966, and by 1967 I was subscribing to UFO newsletters and UFO magazines, and joined the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization and National Investigations Community on Aerial Phenomena, etc. And I became a UFO. I went around, I examined UFO reports, I sent them in and that sort of stuff. I didn't get interested in the abduction phenomenon until I met a person named Bud Hopkins, who became my closest friend for almost 30 years until he died. And that was in 1982. And I didn't start doing abduction research myself until 1986. I sort of sat with him and learned how to do this for 4 years before I attempted hypnosis. And hypnosis, you have to put in quotes because it's just simple relaxation techniques. Mm-hmm. So that's how I got into it. I don't know how I got into it, in other words, other than through abductions. I do know. But so I've spent almost my entire adult life studying the subject.
Let me ask you this. Abductions, a lot of people now are calling them experiences. So abductees are experiencers. Do they have anything in common other than the fact that they've been abducted?
No, I have nothing else in common. The word experiencer itself is so vague. Yeah. You know, I tripped on my off the curb the other day and hit my knee on the street. It was an amazing experience. So it can apply to anything at all. Abductees applies to the fact that these people have been abducted, and when we use that term, everybody knows immediately that that abduction is a UFO abduction as opposed to kidnappers. And however, I hate the term abductee. I dislike it. But I've tried every other conceivable kind of term. Nothing else fits, and it's part of the language now, so I just use it, you know.
Yes.
But I never liked it. Anyway, I just kind of came into this phenomenon, and I started being serious about it, you know, in 86. And I wrote my first book, Secret Life, on it in 1992. And in those days, I thought like other people thought, that they were here to, as we would act if we were to go to a planet and find life. We would examine it, we would study it. If we found beings on another planet, we'd grab a couple of them and pull their legs off and look inside, you know, see what's going on, whatever. And that was my mindset, so to speak. And so with Secret Life, I took people on a minute-by-minute abduction event as of what we knew about in 1991, when I wrote the book, came out in 1992. And now I look at that book, and it's not bad. I did not fully understand the role of confabulation, of people saying things that they thought were true in their memories but weren't true. And I included a couple of procedures in the book, which turned out to be not necessarily true. But the book sold well, and Simon & Schuster asked me for another book after that, and that came out as The Threat. And that was a much more nuanced book, and a book with a lot more information in it. And as I began to examine more and more of these accounts and question more closely and all the rest of that, and learn how to do questioning, the phenomenon revealed itself to be not what I thought it was. It was not an experiment. They weren't studying us. They weren't trying to figure out what makes us tick. It was a program that was goal-directed, had a beginning, a middle, and an end. They were here for a reason. And in my last book on the subject, Walking Among Us, I try to deal with my sense of what the reason is and what they're doing and all the rest of that stuff. And what you see in those 3 books is an arc of movement, not only of my own brain, but of the phenomenon itself, because there are things that happen in each book that I hadn't seen before. I don't know whether it's because I hadn't seen them because people just didn't say them, or because they existed, but I just missed them. So I can't tell. I'm looking for change over time. Historians do that. But I don't know whether I actually uncovered change over time, or whether the change had already started a long time ago, and I just found out about it recently. You see what I mean?
Yes, yes. So the only thing they have in common is that they are all abductees. Now, in Walking Among Us, how is that book different from your other books? Because when I looked at your resume on the Contact in the Desert Retreat, I noticed that you're speaking on hybrids, which is a fascinating subject. And I'm thinking that perhaps that is what you included. But will you tell us what makes this book different from the previous books?
Well, it's an extension of our knowledge of the subject into things that have never been discussed before, in terms of human-looking hybrids. And there's a spectrum of hybridization. Bud Hopkins first discovered this in about 1985 or so, or around 1985. He called me up and he told me that he found this unbelievable case, this case that was just astonishing and incredible. He said that this woman was on board, and they took her into a room and they showed her a baby. And when he told that to me, they showed her a baby, I didn't know what I was hearing. I couldn't believe, what are you saying? You know, what do you mean a baby? This is a baby. What are you talking about? You know, it's just like inconceivable, so to speak. And yeah, a baby. And a baby looked strange. It looked like a cross between human and alien. And I thought, a cross between human and alien? How's that possible? You know, it's just, and he said then they wanted her to put the baby to her breast and feed the baby. And my brain just froze. Feed the baby? Did she explain to them that she couldn't feed the baby? She wasn't lactating, she wasn't married, et cetera, wasn't pregnant? And he said, yeah, she said she couldn't do it, but they forced her to put the baby to her breast anyway, feed the baby. And I thought to myself, if this is true, then we will never understand alien thought, because they value form over function. The form is you place the baby to the woman's breast. The function is not there. So what's the point, you know? I learned later the woman was lactating. That already stimulated lactation, and I know what questions to ask to know whether it's going to happen or not. And I know that when they say certain things, I know they're going to probably feed a baby later on. But the fact is, though, that he called the baby a hybrid. It looked like a hybrid, and that was his name for it, and that's stuck for everyone now. So what we see is hybrids who are born as babies. We see them as toddlers. We see them as older kids. We see them as adults. Adolescents, then adults. We see them as adults, maybe even age 40. After that, we don't see them so much anymore. We don't see them as older adults. And we don't know the reason. Maybe they're jettisoned into deep space when they reach the age of 50. Who knows? But we don't see them. And but hybridization turns out to be extremely important. It is the reason why they are here. Now, hybridization itself starts with beings who look very, very, very alien. Now, when I say alien in this context, I mean gray alien. Gray aliens occupy everybody's attention. They are extremely important, but they are just part of a workforce. They are themselves, in my opinion, and I can give you an argument for this, probably hybrids also. The hybrids go from looking half and half, looking really quite alien, to looking sort of half and half, to looking weird but not quite alien, and to looking sort of semi-human, almost there, maybe eyes too big, maybe no bodily hair, to sort of being human in most ways except neurologically. And when I say that, all communication on board is telepathic. But telepathy, as far as I know, is not a normal part of the human condition. If people were truly telepathic and they had numbers like 1%, I think we would live in an entirely different society. The implications of telepathy are staggering when you begin to follow it. They're mind-boggling. But all communication on board is telepathic. That means that in some way, abductees have some change in their minds which allows them to be telepathic in some way. But I'm not sure of that. I'm guessing. That's a guess. And I'll explain why in a second if I can remember. But eventually what we've been seeing then is beings who look human and who are human. And in every way conceivably possible, except one way, neurologically, they can still be telepathic, and as all aliens can do, all of them, regardless of what stage they are or anything, they can control humans neurologically. They can make them think anything they want. They can make them see anything they want. They can make them do anything that they want them to do. And the problem with that is that that's an enormous advantage over us. Unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about it. Now, might be something, but that comes later. But what that does is it makes us a sort of second-class species and makes them a first-class species. That's the problem. I would rather have it the other way, to tell you the truth. I want to be a first-class species. I don't want to be a second-class. I want them to be second-class species. But this is, in my opinion, not good. Call me crazy, but I just don't think this is good. So, and that's what abductees have been reporting, that they're moving into the society and being taught how to live here. Here's the problem for them, for hybrids who look human. They have learned what goes on in Earth society by abductees while they're children on board a UFO. They will congregate in a room. The abductee will be standing there. And I've used this incident many times because it's a perfect incident. On the wall, a curved wall, of course, and the children, let's just say they're 7 years old or something like that. There's a picture of a dog on the wall, and this is an actual incident. The children asked the abductee, "What's a dog for?" And she says, "Well, it's for companionship and love, and they get to play with the dog, and it's fun, and this and that." "Do you eat dogs?" No, we don't eat dogs. We don't eat dogs. Next picture, a goat. "What's a goat for?" "Well, when there's goats, you can get milk, which can be turned into cheese if you want. And do you eat goats?" And she said, "Well, I'm a vegetarian, so I don't eat goats, but there are some people who do eat goats, yes." And that kind of training, and you can get a lot of abductees talking about a lot of different things over the years, but by the time they grow up into adult hybrids, into young adults and starting 17, 18, 19, when they start to move in, when they come here, they realize that there are 10 billion things that they have not learned. Living in society for the first time is the enormity is beyond imagination, no matter how many times abductees have stood in front of them and explained to them what a spoon is. I mean, it's the enormity of it is beyond imagination. So they have to have abductee help with furnishing their apartment, with buying clothes, with going shopping, with talking to somebody casually in a parking lot if you pass them by. If you go to a cashier when you're buying something and the cashier says, "Hi, how you doing?" They can't just stand there and be silent. They have to answer something back. Casual talk with strangers, in other words. All of this has to be learned. The enormity of it is amazing. But they are extremely good listeners. They're very smart. They remember everything. So all you do is tell it to them once and they know it. And that's what this book is about, and that's not been in any of my other books, to answer your question. And it's new knowledge about what has been happening now. Some of the cases that I put in this book are older cases that I'd never published before, but I realized later that these will fit the mold of what I'm hearing now. So that's why the book's original title was The E.T. Menace, not my title. And I said, no, I don't think so. How about Walking Among Us? I came up with it very quickly, and the reason I came up with that is because when people said, do you think that they are walking among us? I love that question. It was my favorite question because the question allowed me to say, absolutely not. There's no evidence whatsoever that they are walking among us. And I felt normal. I felt sane. I could say something like that. Yes. Now it's my least favorite question. Do you think they're walking among us? And I had to say, yeah, yes, I do. I think they're walking among us. And it's even to say it, it's embarrassing to me because it's so science fiction-y. It's so off the wall. It's so nutty. And yet, everything within the abduction phenomenon from my first book on ultimately points to the idea that this is a program of assimilating into the society. I just can't get away from that, unfortunately. It's where the evidence has led me.
I'm so glad you're sharing that because I had a question before we spoke about, well, do the hybrids know that they are hybrids? And you've answered it. I mean, absolutely. There's no question. I've had several clients say, well, maybe I'm a hybrid. There's no way there's a maybe involved.
Right. Yeah. First of all, they don't know the word hybrid, usually. And they don't consider themselves hybrid. I don't know what they consider themselves, to tell you the truth. They have said that their task is to live here. That's what they were bred for. And I've had people say the same thing. I'm a hybrid. My boyfriend's a hybrid. Whatever, and things like that. Or I saw a hybrid. He was really, he was tall. He was weird looking. He didn't know this. He didn't know that. But humans are weird, and hybrids aren't so weird, actually. The ones who are not average are culled from the herd. They go straight for the average height, average weight, average everything. And they go for this program is extremely well thought out. This is not these aliens doing it on a lark. There are three aspects of it, and I'm sorry I've said this many times before, but I have to keep reminding people in a way. There are three sort of unnerving aspects to it. Number one, it's global. This is not an American phenomenon. It is not our special world here. It goes around the world. I've worked with people from Asia, from Africa, from Latin America, etc. There are abductees who write to me from all over the world, filling out this questionnaire, which points to abductions and all that. And global means the amount of energy and time put into this phenomenon by these beings is simply astounding. It's mind-boggling. The amount of energy, time, the amount of beings involved with it, the amount of UFOs involved with it. This is not something that just sort of happened. This is a very well thought out plan. And the question then is, and I don't know the questions that people deal with, but the question is, if this is the case, are we the first planet to ever undergo this phenomenon of hybridization? The answer is that's not possible. Just not possible. And I give the reasons why it's just not. This is never. This is routine. This has obviously happened before. The other question is, are these the first aliens ever to hybridize a planet? That is also not possible. The other question is, are there just, when I talk about this subject, I talk about the two. There were people who, there are no scientists who say this anymore, but just a few years ago, scientists were saying, there were many scientists that were the only advanced technological civilization out there in the galaxy. Because of all the bizarre things that have happened to the Earth that allowed for life to come about. The moon or whatever it was hitting us and knocking us off kilter, and we're 7.5 degrees now, off to the side, which allows for seasons to come, spring and winter and all that, and the fact that we're a certain distance away from the sun, where the temperature is just perfect for us, and the destruction of the dinosaurs, and all the rest of that stuff, and it just couldn't have happened anywhere else. Nobody says that anymore. That's the rare earth theory. However, when scientists think about this subject, they invariably think about life in outer space as little tiny creepy crawly things in the water. And if they're bold, they'll think about little tiny creepy crawly things on land. Technology, they don't think about, for reasons that are beyond my imagination. And when they do think about technology, they say, well, they can't get here from there. Yeah, because even traveling at the speed of light, you turn it to pure energy, it takes years and years and years and years, maybe even hundreds, maybe thousands of years to get here. So they can't get here from there. Of course, the answers to these questions are, number one, don't be stupid, and number two, it does not matter how they get here. The question is, are they here or not? That is the only salient question. It's the only question of any merit. Are they here or not? How they got here is unknown. They have an advanced technology to get here. It has to be extremely advanced compared to us, because our technology goes back, the technology historians will say anywhere from 150 to 250 years, let's say 250 years. That is not time in terms of global time, in terms of cosmic time or geologic time. That is not time. That's just not even the blink of an eyelash. It's just a millionth of a second. Let's just say our technology is 5,000 years old. Okay, that's still a millionth of a second. 5,000 years in cosmic time does not merit being called time. It's so short. So if they have technology, it's got to be very, very, very advanced. And that is what abductees describe. Very advanced technology. We know we have thousands of cases of abductees describing what's inside a UFO and what's being done to them in a UFO and this and that and this and that. We have absolutely zero. We have zero knowledge of the technology that they use in any situation. We do not know when they're lying on a table and a machine is passed over them, we do not know what that machine does. If they're placed in a room where there are specific lights on them, we don't know what those lights do. We don't know anything about their technology at all, interestingly enough, because if this were psychological and people were just inventing this, they'd tell us. But they don't know what it is, and therefore we don't know what it is. But all of their technology is obviously extremely advanced. But what threw us when we first started to look at this was, it's not just technology that's advanced, it's neurology that's extremely advanced. Their ability to understand what's in our thoughts, to tap into our minds, to stare from an inch away from our eyes, or maybe touching forehead, stare into our eyes, using the optic nerve as a conduit into energizing any neural pathways that they want in our brains. That came out of the blue. That was just not in our conceptions of what happens when people are abducted. But we learned that very early on, that this was a normal part of this phenomenon. And so it's neurologically advanced, it's technologically advanced. No, we're not. I don't know how else to put it. So it's an unusual phenomenon, to say the least. It's not what I expected when I began to look at this, and it is not what I wrote in my very first book on this subject in 1992. Now, I'm not a math wizard, so I don't know how many years ago that was, but it was a long time ago.
Well, you know, this listening to you speak, I have so many questions. First of all, on the part of our audience, I want to ask this first one. Have you met and spoken with a hybrid?
I'm going to give that to you in two parts.
Okay.
I have not met a hybrid.
Pardon?
I have not met a hybrid.
Okay.
It's possible I met one somewhere. I had no idea it was a hybrid. You know, who knows? But the question is have I had communication from a hybrid? I have two books to write. One is How to Do Hypnosis with Abductees. I would like to standardize what I laughingly call the field, which consists of me and maybe 3 or 4 other people in the country. So that constitutes the field. Yvonne Smith in LA, Craig Lang in Minnesota, Jed Turnbull in New York. I guess there's others, but nobody's gotten in touch with me about it. So there's very few of us. So I would like to standardize for everybody who's trying this, to show them how to question, what the pitfalls are, how to recognize confabulation, what to say to people when they say X, Y, and Z. You are required to say A, B, and C, or something like that. You know, having said that, the question then is, have I ever communicated with a hybrid? And the answer is yes. I don't know if you read the book, but there's a character in there named Jamie, who is a hybrid, and he is sort of one of the stars of the book. And I had a series of emails and AOL instant messaging of all things, but there's a reason for this, with him, where we had 8 conversations, sometimes lasting as long as 4 hours, starting at 1 o'clock in the morning. And that will be my last book. That will be communications and the events that led up to this situation where I think that I am the only person who's ever been able to have a conversation with a hybrid and not be an abductee, or not be in that hybrid's control in some way, and know that he was a hybrid. I don't think anybody can ever say that, has ever said that, and they will maybe in the future, but not now. So that will be my final book, and the answer is, the events that led up to it were some of the scariest events in my life for both me and my family. There's a plot involved with this. It's got a storyline. Most of my books don't have plots and storylines. They're just nonfiction books. But this one actually does have it's nonfiction, but it has leading characters in it. It has events leading up to trying to find where I am and stop me from interviewing this one abductee, and then a series of discussions with this other, with Jamie, and I don't know whether this book will ever get published, but that will be my last book. And after that, it's sitting contemplating my navel and watching television. That's what I want.
Well, let me ask you this question, because it seems such a logical question. What is the connection between the hybrid and the abductee? What role does that abductee play in the hybrid's agenda?
Well, the abductee teaches the hybrid, who looks human, who is human in every way possible except neurologically. The abductee teaches the hybrid, once again, how to go shopping, how to do this, how to do that. They teach them how to be human, how to blend into human society. Many of these hybrids will get jobs, in quotes, let's just say as an intern. Since they can control people, they'll walk into a bank, for example, or whatever it is, and convince the manager or whoever they talk to that they would require that they need an intern. Let's just say without even any payment. And the person who they're talking to, now I'm imagining this, I don't know this, will say, yes, that's a wonderful idea. And this person becomes an intern. And there's a little business I have in this book about people who have these kinds of jobs. And eventually what happens is the hybrid learns so much about the society and assimilates so well into the society that they no longer come around to the abductee, and a new one comes around. And the abductee then starts all over again with a new hybrid who's just settled into the apartment. And the first thing the abductee does is, when they go over to the hybrid's apartment, is teach them how to furnish the apartments. Even though they've been in people's places before, they have to know how to form the chairs around the table, and how to, if they have a couch and a coffee table, they should have a television somewhere there. And they should have, and if there's a shower, it should probably have a shower curtain, and things like that they might not have known about. There's one little piece in the book where this woman goes into a bedroom. There's a group of three. When they're younger, let's just say age 17, 18, 19, 20, they live together in twos and threes and sometimes fours. And they had this one woman come in, and they showed her the bedroom, and they said, she said, do you have sheets on this bed? And they pulled back the blanket, and there were sheets there, and they were very proud of that. And she said, where's the pillow? And they looked at each other in confusion, and then they went into a drawer. They said, you mean this? And here was this pillow that was still in its plastic bag. And she said, yes, it has to have a pillow. You have to have a pillow on this. Well, why? Well, because people. So they put the pillow there while she watched, or whatever it was. I can't remember exactly now, but they did. There's no pillows on board a UFO. So, but my favorite story in my book, and there's lots of stories like this. There's lots of accounts like this. I loaded up on accounts because I wanted it to show people that it's not just one. There's a whole bunch of people who are doing this. And there's a whole bunch of different hybrids, or hubrids as I call them, human hybrids. But it was a kid. I'm not sure how old the kid was. They do not know when they were born because they actually weren't born. What we discovered early on was that men were having sperm taken from them, and women were having eggs taken from this. And we knew this for decades. We knew it from the first 2 abductions that we ever recorded. One almost 60 years ago, the Antonio Villas-Boas event in Brazil, where he was forced to have sexual intercourse with a human-looking alien of some sort, which of course was not believed by anybody, except maybe 1 or 2 people who investigated the case. And then later on, well, I won't go into it. And then the Barney and Betty Hill case, where sperm was taken from Barney, although he had John Fuller, who wrote a book about it, about them, he had them take it out of the book because he was so embarrassed by it. Thank God for that, because nobody then could say, no debunkers could say, well, all the other guys who said that this had happened to them picked it up from the Barney and Betty Hill story, but they can't say that. And women have eggs taken from them routinely. Eventually, an embryo that has been manufactured, the egg and sperm are put together, and not necessarily from 2 people who are on board at the same time, but just randomly, almost certainly. And a change is made in that zygote. I'm going to say alien DNA is added, and I'm saying that, but I do not know if aliens have DNA. That is unknown. So the embryo that has been cultured is then placed into the woman, and about 9 or 11, between 9 and 12 weeks later, the fetus is removed and is placed in a gestation tank with a brownish liquid nutrient in it. Those babies can continue to grow within the tanks. This has been recorded many, 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 many times. I cannot tell you how many times people have described this. And when they're babies, they're taken out. Therefore, they have no birthday. They don't know how old they are. They say, and this one person who I dealt with, I asked him how old he was. He said, well, he thinks he's around 23 or 24, something like that, whatever he said to me. They've never had a birthday party. They've never been given presents. They've never had a birthday cake. They don't know anything about birthdays, It's the oddest thing. So when you ask how old they are, you're never quite certain how old they are. You can guess within a certain amount of time, a couple of years, whatever, but neither do they. Now, I'm not exactly remembering what your question was. But
you're on a roll.
Well, I can start talking about this thing, and you have to shut me up to get me to stop. So,
well, let me ask you this question. Since we're interacting, because I like to turn you loose so that you can just flow with let the information flow from you. The obvious question is, why do these abductees go along with that kind of program? And so my question is, obviously they're under mind control. Obviously they're being controlled. They're hypnotized on some level. And so the solution would be, if there is a solution, and I would imagine that you're giving us the subject, I would imagine the predicate is going to be a bomb, is to deprogram ourselves, which is my bailiwick. Now you've entered my field of operations, but talk about that for a minute, because I think it's vitally important.
Well, deprogramming basically means emptying the person, in a sense, of all that's ever happened to him or her, but it's just not possible. Oh, I know what I'm saying. It's a global phenomenon. It's also intergenerational. In other words, if a person is an abductee, that person's mother or father or both sometimes are abductees. And their abductions begin in childhood, in early childhood, age 3, 4, 5, whatever, and sometimes even infancy, because we know that sometimes mothers are abducted with their infants. So, and they have an enormous and mind-boggling number of abductions. If a person comes to me and he's 40 years old and his first abduction started when he was 1 year old, 40 years ago or something like that, and he has five a year, and I've used this before, 5 a year is just not possible. It's every single abductee I talk to has said that they'd give their right arm to be abducted only 5 times a year. Crazy as that sounds. So if you're 40 years old and you come to me and you've written down everything that's ever happened to you, well, that's a couple hundred abductions. And it's not like that. I had a guy come to me with about 200 or 300 abductions that he had written down. This is all these odd things that had happened to him that were obviously abductions. Most people don't remember any of them at all. The vast majority of abductees don't know that they're abductees. So deprogramming them, it's not going to be possible. The only thing we can do is look at certain things. If you look at 30 incidents that's happened in their adult lives, it's not even scratching the surface. There are people who are abducted a couple times a week for months and months on end, and then I'll hold off for a couple of weeks, and then it starts again. It's every aspect of this phenomenon, when you look at it, is so off the wall nuts that you can't believe what you're hearing, and the force of the evidence just allows you to believe it. It requires you to believe it. I have worked with people who are medical doctors, people who are psychiatrists, people who are psychologists, and I mean PhD psychologists, people who are university professors, people who are attorneys, and they all say the same thing as people from India say, who have never held a job or whatever, and the reason why people forget this is the third reason for the problem of this subject, is that it's clandestine, it's secretive. Now, in one of my books, I think The Threat, I wrote a whole chapter on secrecy, to protect the growing fetus, to do this, to do that. There's all sorts. In this book, and my new book, I just boil it down to one sentence, And it's an irrefutable sentence. That's what I like about it. They don't want us to know what they're doing. That's it. If they were here for wonderful, beneficial reasons to heal the earth and heal me and heal my own brain, which I could use, they don't want. They would tell us, "This is great." We'd be very accepting. This would be wonderful. But in fact, they don't want us to know what they're doing. Their assumption is if we found out what they were doing, we might take steps to stop it in some way. There are certain ways, maybe. So it's clandestine, it's global, and it's intergenerational. It starts in infancy. Those three things add up to not good. This is not good. There's no way you can get around it. It's, oh, good Lord, this is awful. And this is what I call, this is a guess. What I call global acquisition. These are very advanced beings. This is global acquisition. This is a global phenomenon. They are going about their business as if they've done this many times in the past. And the more I look at this, the more frightened I become of it. This is awful. I don't think I'm old enough to look into the future and see an end to the future sometime in the future, But for my sons, I don't think they're going to be living in a future they think they're going to be living in. I don't know. And the problem here also is that the scientific and academic community is not only ignores it, they just laugh at it. It's beneath their contempt. The abduction phenomenon is just so stupidly ridiculous to them. Even though I have worked with scientists who are abductees, but in the general academic and scientific community, it's just craziness gone overboard. They laugh at it more so now than ever, and the UFO phenomenon more so now than ever before since the UFO phenomenon began. More so now. It's worse now than ever.
And why is that, David? Why do you think it's worse now? Are we coming to that tipping point? I mean, why now is it worse?
I think it's for several reasons. Number one, the abduction phenomenon is totally crazy. It just makes no sense to people who know nothing about it. Once they learn about it, it suddenly begins to make sense. I think also because it's on television, the UFOs and especially conspiracy theories are on television all the time, and it becomes just another part of popular culture. And there, UFO researchers used to, in their organizations, used to have lists of consultants who were scientists and who had postgraduate degrees and all that. Back in 2002, I gave a talk on this, and I counted up every single person that I could find in my files and so forth who had lent their name to major UFO organizations. And there were their real names out in public who were scientists or had PhDs or whatever they were, who were academics. And I found 1,200 people who had done that in past years. Now, if there's 12 in the whole country, if I said that there's 12, I'd probably be lying. And because the UFO community, which I've been a member of since 1965, had learned everything there was to learn except some shapes and some this and that now people are seeing larger UFOs, but have learned everything about UFOs by the late 1970s. And all the reports we were getting were already sort of known and this and that, and they collected more and more reports, which is fine and good. But books had been written about every facet of the UFO phenomenon you can imagine. Their effects on animals, their effects on humans, their effects on the environment, their effects on electrical, mechanical devices, and on and on and on and on. And what happened after that is people began to turn, because of the Roswell situation and all that, they began to turn to government conspiracy, inspiring to hold information from us, which had always been there. But at the same time, and I wrote my doctoral dissertation on this, in fact, but at the same time, it becomes not UFO research, it becomes government research. And that's a horse of another color. That's a whole different story. And everybody has turned their attention to government research, which is fine with me. That's great. I want to know what the government has and all that. But they've gotten away from studying UFOs because they learned everything there was to learn about UFOs. And doing abduction work is so difficult, and it takes a certain person to do it. There are some people who I just can't imagine them doing hypnosis with abductees because you have to be sympathetic to them. And I was fortunate. I taught at Temple for 36 years. I taught at the University of Nebraska before then for a year. I would be on a Tuesday, Thursday schedule. I would be on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule. Sometimes I would be on a 5-day schedule, but I would have afternoons free. So I could afford to see abductees at most days of the week or in the weekends. And I would spend between 4 and 5 hours of time with each one of them, not doing hypnosis the whole time, but talking with them for an hour, doing hypnosis sessions, talking with them for another hour, et cetera, et cetera. And getting their lives straight, because most of the ones who come to me, the abduction phenomenon they're remembering is interfering with the normal course of their lives. They're fixated on it. They're having trouble sleeping at night. They're sleeping with a gun under their pillow, their lights on, the TV on, etc., waiting for them to come in through their window or whatever, and scared to death all the time. And my job is to get their lives on an even keel so that they don't have to do that, and they can turn the lights off, and they can have a normal life like they're entitled to, even though they're being abducted at the same time. And when I get to that point with them, I feel I've won a victory.
You have. You absolutely have. Now, I've got to ask you a question. You mentioned earlier, and we've got some time for you to answer this, you mentioned that their objective was global acquisition. And I've got two questions.
I'm guessing that.
Right. Toward what end, number one. And number two, what can we do to change that?
I don't know toward what end. I do not know the future. They don't say what the future will be. What the gray aliens say, and these are workers, you got to remember, they're the ones who look like, people describe various different types on board, but the ones who I think are the leaders are the ones who look like praying mantises. They're insect-like ones. I call them insectolins, insect aliens put together. And they really look weird. They do look like praying mantises in a strange way. Not quite, but they have a triangular face and very big eyes on the corners of the triangle and all that. And they're the ones who I think are the leaders. They're the ones who give orders. Everybody else takes orders. Now, it's not so much taking orders in that kind of a society. It's being bred to do certain tasks. The gray aliens were created to do what they are doing. There's ones who looked reptilian, sort of, and I deal with them as well. There's a reason for them to be on board. The reptilians do not say what the future will bring. Abductees have heard the gray aliens say, soon there'll be a change. Soon a change is coming. Change is wonderful. Everybody's going to know his place. Everybody's going to be happy. The change will be coming. The change. So I would ask people, what do they mean by the change? And they said, I don't know. Nobody knew. I said, well, what do they mean by soon? A word that is not a word. It could mean 10 seconds. It could mean 10,000 years for all we know, you know. So nobody knew. Nobody knew that either. However, when I wrote the book, The Threat, I did notice that there was hybrids who looked human. And people would be brought into a room, and they would look at an image on the wall, and the image would be, and here's two things that I put in that book. Here's an image of a picnic. And it's just a normal picnic in a park, picnic bench, a grill, people playing ball, throwing a ball around, and they hear in their mind's ear, can you tell the difference between you and us? And the entity looks at the thing on the wall and says, what do you mean? Everybody looks the same. But there is a difference. What are you talking about? Then they hear, see, isn't that wonderful? Soon we will all be together. Soon everyone will know his place. Soon everybody's going to be happy. There's another one I had where people were lined up like on steps of a school photograph. You know, here's the class of 1998 or whatever. And there's only like 12 people, though. And they're all looking at the, quote, camera or whatever it is. And they hear the same thing. Can you tell the difference between you and us? And they say, well, I know, of course. And the same kind of response. Well, soon everybody's going to be happy. And I paid attention to it, but it didn't register with me what the implications of that were until I began to hear things later that I put in Walking Among Us.
And on that note, I think everybody wants to run out and buy a copy of Walking Among Us. David, thank you so much for being my guest. I hope you'll come back after the Contact in the Desert retreat, June 3rd through 6th of this year, 2016. I hope you'll come back and let's talk about this some more, because I know you've probably got much more information to share. Will you be my guest again?
My brain is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, all of you, for being part of this amazing interview. I hope you'll join me again next time. And just remember, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. See you next time.